Welcome to the Rocket Roof Show, where we equip fellow roofers to do more commercial business every first and third Thursday of the month. It's time to launch your business to the next level.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Rocket Roof Show with your host, Andy Neer here, where we equip and educate roofing contractors for the commercial roofing industry. And glad to have you back. And this is episode number, you know what, I don't even know. It's somewhere around 40. I don't count them like Randy Brothers does. So apologize for that, but it's somewhere around the 40-ish range. And today I'm excited about having a guest on the show that's very familiar with the FluidApplied part of the roofing industry. And that is Joe from CJ Spray. I don't want to mess up your last name. How do you say your last name, Joe?
It's Buechler.
Okay, I was going to say Buechler, but I knew I was going to be wrong. So Buechler, good to have you with us, and let's have a good show.
Excellent. Well, thank you for having me, Andy. I appreciate it.
So I'm going to start off by asking you, so you're with CJ Spray.
Yep.
What does CJ Spray do, and how are they connected with the roofing industry?
So CJ Spray is a fluid applied equipment company that handles kind of anything that's required to, any piece of equipment rather, that's required to spray, mix, meter, or dispense a product.
Okay.
So anything from soccer moms wanting to spray their fences to, roofing contractors spraying fluid applied coatings, waterproofing, air vapor barrier, plural component that go on like big metal objects like water towers. And then we also do spray foam and other intumescent fireproofing. That's, different types of coatings, really.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you do a lot of other things besides the roofing industry. You do equipment, industrial, stuff like that. But
correct.
But as far as like in the roofing industry, there's a lot of guys rolling, and there's things called better spreaders. You don't do any of that. You're strictly spray.
Yep. Spray application. And also, anything that really has to do with pumps. So when we think of, spraying or applying a coating, the pump is what's doing the work. It's the application between the person's hand and the substrate. That's what's defined as actually what it is, whether it's dispensing or spraying or pressure rolling. There's a lot of different things that we can do with the equipment. Spraying is just, people think of pumps and they think of sprayers. That's what it's doing, but we can do a lot of different stuff with the equipment too.
Okay. So has CJ Spray always been in the roofing industry, or how did they get involved in roofing?
So CJ Spray started in 1995. They were, prior to 1995, we were known as a company called Air Products, and we handled turbine sprayers. So guys that were spraying airplanes and boats and cars and high-end furniture. Chris and Jim, that's what the C and the J stand for. Jim owned that company, and he sold it to Graco in 1993 and then opened a distributorship in 1995. So as we kind of got started in the distributorship, we were looking at ways to separate ourselves because certainly there are a lot of people selling equipment out there, and it was, Chris started looking into more niche pockets of the market of spray equipment. And we found waterproofing, air barrier, and roof coatings, or what we call architectural protective coatings is what we kind of call that market. Okay. And it's grown into the second largest division of CJ Spray. So the only thing that's larger than roof coatings and waterproofing and air barrier is our spray foam division.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
The reason I asked that is because, this isn't just Flex Seal equipment. This is industrial commercial equipment to put down fluid applied applications on roofing. It's right up there with surgical equipment.
Correct. Yes. Well, it's the nice thing about it is that it's not terribly complicated. There's a lot obviously on the upfront that that we really specialize in trying to talk with customers and figuring out, what package fits their needs the most. So when you're talking about, getting into equipment, I would say that there's a lot more legwork that you should be doing on the front end. That, getting with different people who have been in the industry, talking with people who are equipment guys who know the equipment, and really figuring out what piece of equipment best suits your needs based on how productive you want to be. And what your budget, what fits your budget, right? So
don't get ahead of me too much. I got questions down the line a little way, so you're getting ahead of me a little too much. So how long have you been with CJ Spray?
So I have been with CJ Spray for a little over 7 years now. Okay. I've been in the equipment industry for a little over 10. So I'd like to think I do, yes.
Yeah, because, me coming from the shingle and metal roofing world, and then I still did some TPO. Dealing with pumps is a whole nother animal. I mean, you're dealing with pressures, you're dealing with viscosity, you're dealing with cure times, you're dealing with tip sizes. And so I had a call with you a while ago, and it was comforting to know, like, you can explain that, and we're going to go over this a little bit. It's you have to understand that if you're going to get into the fluid applied, and you can't just be like, call up a distributor and be like, yeah, I want a couple tips and a gun to spray it, and I'll be out, good to go.
Right.
You got to understand hose sizes and tip sizes. And so I want to just kind of share, like, you got to work with a supplier that can explain that and work with you for your needs.
Right. And, there's a lot of different places that you can buy equipment, right? I mean, certainly, there's a lot of different avenues you can go. I'm a big proponent of dealing with contractors or dealing with distributors who are equipment only guys. Meaning that we're not involved in the fluid side. We don't sell coatings. And the reason being is that I separate myself from that relationship. So it's nice to have a relationship with your coatings manufacturer and with your equipment guy, because sometimes it can be a little bit complicated. Some of the issues that you run into, not so much in the roofing division or the roofing side of things, but when you start getting into plural component equipment, there can be some times where it goes back and forth, whether it's an equipment issue or it's a, it's a coatings issue, right? So having that relationship be separate, it allows you as a contractor, in my opinion, to kind of be able to separate the two so that you can lean on one or the other as you need it. And you're not really kind of hamstringing yourself because you're relying on the same person for both things.
Yep.
So it's from that perspective, I think that's kind of how CJ Spray has always gone to business.
Yep.
We work with a lot of different material manufacturers, and I'm not really concerned with what makes their products different or better, or what the warranties are. What I care about is I'm an expert on getting it from whatever vessel that material's in onto whatever you want to put it on.
Yep.
And what's the fastest way to do that, right? Or the best way to do that. So,
right. Okay. So, before we get into the nitty gritty of equipment and all that stuff, I want to talk about the fluid applied industry, because fluid applied in general has been around for a long time. I mean, they're putting hot tar roofs on Henry Ford's plants back in the 40s and 50s. So that was kind of the original, the roof tar. But now there's more sustainable products, and a lot of people haven't realized, even coatings it's white, and it's it's latex based or silicone based or whatever. You got all these other ones that it's not tar. It's really a similar concept. It's fluid applied. It's seamless. So, but TPO is the main player in the market right now.
Right.
But you can see the fluid applied creeping up every year. It's gaining sales. So, have you seen a lot of a growth pattern moving up with fluid applied last few years?
Yes, I have. I think as I would say over the last 5 years, we're starting to see more and more of it. I spend a lot more time every day, it seems like, talking with roofing contractors and dealing with different issues that they're having and trying to figure out different solutions for them. I will say, though, I do think that there is a good bit of growth. I think there's going to be more of that coming, just as, we deal with, the labor shortage. I mean, prior to COVID, there was a big labor shortage in the United States. And I think The one downfall of a lot of these systems is they require a lot of people in order to install them. And that's the one thing that fluid applied coatings really can stand alone and separate itself from, in my opinion, is that it doesn't require a massive crew in order to install it, especially to install a lot of it, quickly. So it's
3 or 4 man crew. Most of the guys I know have a 3 or more 4-man crew.
Right. Yep. So, I mean, from that aspect, I mean, it's it's going to be a growing market, I certainly believe.
We'd like to take just a quick break to thank our sponsor, Top Roof Marketing, a full-service marketing group that specializes in the commercial roofing industry. If you're looking to boost the commercial side of your business, they have lots of ideas to connect you with building owners who are looking for help. Visit toproofmarketing.com.
And then to add on what you just said, now you got the material shortage on a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
From the screws to the ISO board. And I see quite a few guys that are winning jobs right now just because the Single-Ply is not available. Mm-hmm. The customers are like, well, what other options do I have? Well, okay, there's coatings they're still a few weeks more out lead time, but they're more readily available than the other one.
Correct. Yep. No, I'm seeing definitely. I mean, we've had major growth in this division in our business, certainly. Talking to some of the other distributors and some other people within the industry. I mean, you're seeing growth, you're seeing very large projects starting to get pushed now towards fluid applied. So, I mean, yeah, I'm very optimistic about the future of fluid applied coatings and the equipment that's required in order to get it onto the roof. So,
right. So, what rig would you recommend? I'm really going to get into the practical start of it. But,
right.
You got a new guy coming on board. Maybe he's got 100 square roof, 200 square roof. And what kind of rig should he start off with? Now, I know it's not an open, or that's not like an
right.
Because what is he looking for? But what kind of rig would a new guy?
So normally the questions that I'll ask him, obviously number one is what's the scope of the work that you're doing?
Yep.
And from there, we have to determine, okay, how much of that scope are you doing? So you might say, Joe, I've got a 200 square roof. Okay, sounds good. But how many, 40, 50 square roofs do you have? Well, that's the primary bit of my business. Okay, so what you're going to end up doing is that's kind of the market that you're going to really focus on, this 50, 60 square roof type of space. But every once in a while, you're going to get a 200, 250 square roof, in that mix. The next thing is, how often are you looking to do this? Is this something that you're bolting on to a current business? Is this something that you're just starting up? You already have a lot of want or need for it? Like really understanding the customer's market, like understanding kind of getting to know, their expectations. We talk to guys everywhere from we're like, well, I'm just kind of dabbling in this. I'm just kind of getting started. They're more budget conscious. And then we get guys who are calling me up and saying, yeah, I've got 275,000 square feet and I've got to get it done as fast as I possibly can because the job's closed and I got to go. So it's a wide range. So kind of really getting to know the customer first, understanding kind of what their expectations are, finding out what their budget is. We can really get into, custom making them a package that meets, all those needs. I always say, to any contractor that I talk to, my goal not so much is to sell you a pump, but is to more be a consultant to you. I want to make sure that you get into a piece of equipment that number one is productive, number two is profitable for you, and then finally fits your budget. So kind of like saying like, what pump do I recommend? There's a lot of different options out there. And we sell a wide variety of different pumps, whether it's Graco or Titan. On the spray foam side, we're PMC distributors, Carlisle distributors. So we do a lot of different, we sell a lot of different equipment. So I don't think there's not necessarily so much a one size fits all for any contractor. It's really, talking to them, sitting down with them, understanding what they want, and then fine tuning a piece of equipment to figure, to meet their needs starting out, but then also kind of taking into consideration, what's growth going to look like? In 5 years, what do you want this thing to be able to do? Do you kind of see yourself in this size of, the size of scope of jobs, or do you, potentially see yourself getting more of those 200 square jobs? And that's, kind of what you're going to want to grow to. So we kind of,
I bought a Graco 7900 off of eBay for like $800 back in 2010.
Yeah.
And we used that for about 700, or I'm sorry, I bought it for $700, but we used that for about 5 years. And
right.
then we ended up buying a used 733 from a local contractor that tried coatings for a few jobs and didn't like it.
Yep.
And so now we have both of those rigs. But I see too many guys that are like, oh, I found this rig. Will it work for what I'm doing? And instead of like, this is what I'm doing, and looking for the rig that fits that criteria.
Right. And actually, that's how a lot of conversations with contractors.
What's that?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt.
I was gonna say, sometimes it's like they found it and they just want to make it work for them, and it.
Right. Right. That's how a lot of conversations actually get started with a lot of contractors. Is they'll come up to me and be like, "Joe, I found this thing on eBay.
Yep.
What do you think?" And I actually talk when I do trainings and stuff, and I talk to a lot of these contractors. I tell them, again, think of me as a consultant. If you find something really cool that you think is going to work online or somewhere somebody's trying to sell, give me a call and let me know what, and let me know kind of, what you're looking to do and what price. I mean, certainly I can kind of be a third party. I don't have any, ties to it or anything. And I can figure out, what I think it might be worth, not necessarily to lowball or anything. But I do it more for, a lot of guys will talk and they'll say, Joe, I got this pump. I found it for $800 on eBay. Okay, perfect. Well, will it work? Absolutely it will. But here's some things to kind of to kind of keep an eye on. That machine may have parts that are no longer available. Right. That pump might not actually work properly. So when you get it for a great price, but you sink a ton of money into it to make it operational, right? So it's nice to have somebody available to you that, knows the equipment, can kind of look at it from a third party observation, give you their thoughts on it. Because I've seen a lot of guys too many times, they see a good deal, but they end up chasing, good money after a bad investment more times than not, just because they didn't know exactly what they were getting into. And you see more and more of that now.
So let's move into a little bit about hoses. A lot of people don't really understand how hoses work, the diameters, the pressure ratings, how that relates to losing pressure over a period of distance. Can you kind of give me just some Reader's Digest version of what a new guy should understand when he's looking at?
Yeah. So the idea, the easiest way to kind of describe that to a new contractor is the longer that you want to pump a coating, the bigger the diameter the hose needs to be. And that's a really simplistic term because there's a lot of other, sorry here, 1 second.
Criteria?
Yes, thank you. There's a lot of other criteria that go into, determining what hose diameters. But from like a simplistic point of view, the longer you want to pump a coating, generally the larger the diameter the hose needs to be. What happens is that the viscosity of the product within the hose creates friction, and that friction creates pressure loss. And the longer it's in the hose, the more pressure loss occurs. And a really small hose, you're trying to put a lot of material through a very small hose. The pressure loss is a lot higher. Through, let's say, the same amount of flow or the same amount of fluid through a 1/2-inch hose is going to be much less.
Well,
so we always want to kind of take into.
Let me interject right there a second. So I know a lot of shingle roofers are like, man, I run 1/4-inch hose all the way up to my shingle roof, 200 feet, no problem.
Right.
But you're dealing with air instead of fluid.
Correct. And you're also talking about volume of air too. So let's say those guys were, they're running small air tools up on the roof. Their consumption might not be very high. So they don't need a larger hose diameter because the air consumption is much higher.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. They don't need to run as large a hose because their air consumption from a volume standpoint is actually lower. Right. So when we're talking about tips, and we'll get to that, I suppose, but when we're talking about pressure loss inside the hose, there's two things that we have to take into consideration. Number one, the amount of pressure that's needed to get that fluid from the pump to whatever apparatus we're using to apply the product. And then also how much fluid is actually coming out of whatever that application apparatus is. The higher the flow, the more pressure that's needed as the viscosity of the product increases.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So next question would be like moving on to guns, kind of moving down the thing here. A lot of people don't realize there's different types of guns, depending on the position you're spraying or what kind of material you're doing.
Right.
So you just sold us a gun a couple days ago that was what I call you called it a four-finger.
Four-finger heavy-duty texture gun. Yep. So it actually was designed originally for drywallers to spray level 5 on walls. And there's nothing more abrasive. There really is nothing that's harder to spray from an equipment standpoint than drywall mud. It's liquid sandpaper. So when we're talking and we're setting up roofing contractors, what we want to look at is, okay, like what is this environment that this piece of equipment is going to be in, right? What are these guys looking at from an application standpoint? I mean, they're out there 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day consistently spraying. So the idea is, from a gun standpoint, we want to have something that's ergonomical. It needs to be comfortable, but it also needs to, I'm sorry, did I stop there?
Just for a second. You're okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. So I'll back up here. So from a gun standpoint, what we need to do is we need to look for something that's, number one, ergonomical. It needs to match, what the roofer's doing in a daily, on the daily. It also needs to be reliable. We want it to be something that doesn't break down. So we want it to be robust, and we want it to not, fail, because what happens with anything, right? Something always breaks the moment that you don't want it to.
Yep. So
when we're looking at these guns, the gun that we sold you was a heavy duty texture gun. And the reason that we sold you that gun is that, number one, it has a larger orifice than any other gun on the market. So the passageways through it are going to be larger. The way that the gun triggers and detriggers, the fluid path of that gun actually acts as almost a door. So instead of the fluid going over the top of the apparatus that triggers open and closed, it actually acts as just a doorway that kind of opens a passageway and lets the fluid go through. And the reason that is because coatings get built up on that trigger assembly, on that needle assembly, and it clogs up, and you run into problems where all of a sudden the gun doesn't trigger anymore. This, that doesn't happen with this gun. And the other reason is that it's, it's an HD gun. It's heavy duty. When you hold it in your hand, it feels like a piece of, a nice piece of equipment. You don't have to feel like if I drop this thing, it's going to break. And we know how contractors are. We know that they tend to be rough on equipment I don't want to generalize, but if I could tell you a million stories of stuff that we've seen come in here, and I always joke about it in the trainings. It's like guys won't say anything until they drop the gun off the roof, or the gun accidentally falls off the roof, and then they call me and say, "Joe, I broke the gun." Oh, well, and you'll hear what they broke, and you'll be like, "How in the world did you break that?" And then they say, "Well, my guy dropped it off the roof," or somebody stepped on it, or somebody ran it over with the truck, or it's.
Last fall, we were doing a job, and the gun clogged. So I took it apart, and I'm looking and trying to pull out those little, somehow one of our blue shop towels that we use on the job to clean stuff. Somehow a little piece of it had gotten into the barrel and it got sucked up. We usually put a screen on the end of our suction tube, but we didn't that day. And somehow it made itself all through the pump to the gun. But by the time it got to the gun, it had disintegrated down to like BB size. But it was just enough to get caught in these little orifices and in the gun. It was a pain in the butt cleaning that thing out.
Yes. And the other problem is too, is that, I mean, you know, from a coatings guy, you're dealing with weather, right? You've got wind, you've got rain. So the number of days that you have that are perfect are limited. So you want that you want the equipment to work and to work well when you gotta get something done.
Exactly.
Especially if you have inclement weather coming in, that's when you really need it. So
move on to the next thing. Let's talk about the extension part of the gun, because you know, we're not like painting guys where you're spraying right out of the tip of the gun. You got 20-inch extension, 30-inch extension, 40-inch, some of them bends on them. Talk to me about what we need to know about extensions.
I mean, it's all going to be personal preference to what the applicator likes. Certainly for most contractors that I deal with, 40-inch extensions seem to be kind of the preferred, because just how they hold the gun out, it gives them something to kind of hold on to. They can find, they can move the tip in a way that, they can kind of be surgical with it if they need to be. And then also a big thing is, having 180-degree swivel on the end of that extension so that you can keep that tip, parallel with the substrate. That way you're not worrying about, bounce back or, the product kicking out and overspraying. So I would say that, the extensions are really kind of a personal preference. I like the heavy duty extensions that have the outer wall just because they're a little bit bigger in diameter and they're easier to kind of handle. But it just depends on kind of what the applicator likes, whether it be a 20 or a 40 or a 60. It also kind of depends on how tall they are too. But most common for us, we use a 40.
And at the last training, I believe you were showing a spray pattern on how if you don't spray at a 90-degree, like straight down, if you're spraying like off the side a little bit, you're actually having an inconsistent pattern.
Correct. Well, you've got to worry about two things. So obviously, if you're not spraying, straight parallel with the substrate, you can have an inconsistent mill thickness because one side of the fan is closer to the substrate than the other. But the other thing is that, if you're tilted, let's say back, that product's hitting the substrate. And if it's not sticking to the substrate, it's going to bounce off. And then basically, if we're kind of spraying in the direction of off the side of the roof, that's kind of what we've got to be careful with. So it's very important that we keep that tip as level to the substrate as we possibly can.
Right. So I got a question for you. If the 40-inch extension is so popular, why is it in all the brochures of other manufacturers that I see, they have this dinky little 20-inch extension and the guy's holding it and it's like you couldn't find a better extension than that?
Well, that's what separates us.
How many times I've seen that on brochures I'm like, that guy's his back's gonna be killing him by the end of the day.
Right. Now there are certain caveats to those extensions. When we get into ultra high pressure, 7,000 PSI, the amount of, or the number of accessories that we have are more limited just because of the pressure. So like a 7,000 PSI pump is only going to have an 18-inch extension at its longest.
Okay.
Where as we get into lower pressures, we have a lot more accessories.
Yeah.
Not to say that, I think that if there was enough market for it and guys were asking enough for it, the equipment manufacturers are really, really good about listening to the consumer. And if there's a need for it, they'll find a way to do it. I mean, it's just, I just don't know if there's been enough guys who have asked, I'd like a 40-inch extension on for high pressure application.
Well, so this might be a rabbit trail, but tell me like what kind of applications would be 6,000 or 7,000.
Generally we spec urethanes and silicones for the most part. And that's very generalized. So I don't want to sound like all of those fall in that category. But when we're talking about ultra high pressure for the roof coating application, it's generally silicones and urethanes.
Okay. Good to know. And so let's move on to the end of the gun, the tip. This is actually very important because there's a lot of variables here. You got your guard, which is the big head that you people see.
Yep, the butterfly.
Yep, the butterfly. It's called tip guard. But then you got the tip. You got the tip that goes inside it. So talk to me about just generalize, sizes and what you would use.
Right. So a lot of the material manufacturers have, done some legwork to figure out what tip sizes work best. And a lot of that can be found in the tech data sheet. A lot of what CJ does is work with those material manufacturers to find those tip sizes. So we do a lot of testing, third-party testing for a lot of material manufacturers to find that. But kind of what we're looking at is, we're going to look at a tech data sheet. We're going to figure out what recommended size we have or need. And then from there, we will kind of determine what works best for the customer. So from a generalized standpoint, when we're looking at a tip size, there's 3 numbers. So when, you look at a tech data sheet, you'll see, it requires a 0.31 to a 0.35 or a 0.35 to a 0.45. That's the second 2 numbers. So when we're talking about a tip size, I'll talk to you and say, Andy, what kind of tips do you want? Or what tips are you looking for? And you'll say, Joe, I want a 635 tip. And what that means is we take the first digit, so 635, we take the 6, we take that number, times it by 2, makes 12. That is that's the distance in inches, or the width of the fan in inches, 12 inches from the substrate. So a 6XX tip size is going to give you a 10 to 12 inch fan pattern, 12 inches away from the roof. The second 2 numbers, like you see in the tech data sheet, generally will be like a 0.31, 0.35. That's the size of the tip in thousandths, the actual size of the orifice. And as that number gets bigger, the amount of material that goes through that tip increases. So primarily what we see from, very generalized for acrylic roof coating guys, they're going to be anywhere between normally like a 625 and a 645 tip. If they're doing detail work, it could be, a 3, because they only need like a 6-inch fan pattern. Or if they're doing seams, they don't need a really ultra wide tip because you want to try to minimize the waste. For silicone guys, it's normally a 31 to a 35 thousandths is pretty common. And urethanes are kind of similar to that as well.
Okay. So I guess one thing that a lot of guys might not realize is tips do wear out, right? You can't.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge thing.
And so I think this was a mistake I made early on. I just use a tip, but I usually end up replacing them because I lose them, right? So it's not like
that's what most guys do. They call me up and they lost.
I know there's a wide variance from contractors that I talk to. Some change them out every job. Some change them out once a week. Some change them out every 3 or 4 jobs. But give me a reason why, what happens when a tip gets worn out?
Yep. So, obviously we're putting an abrasive material through a piece of metal. Over time, it wears out. And as it wears out, the orifice gets larger. So it allows more material to come out. And what happens is that the fan shrinks, but the material increases. So what I normally tell guys is that, there's not a lot of consumables in equipment for coatings. Really, you have the standard maintenance, so pump packings and that bit of it, hydraulic oil, and just general maintenance. The one really true consumable thing that you have in that is tips. And it really is the number one thing that can hurt your profitability. So you figure you have, let's say, a 100 square roof, and you've budgeted X amount of coatings for that, an X number of gallons, and you get to the end of that roof and all of a sudden you're 10 gallons short. It's over application. And a lot of that has to do with the tip size being blown out and the contractor not realizing that it is, because what they'll do is, we kind of tell them at the beginning of the day, this is, what the best practice. You spray a test pattern onto a piece of cardboard, just a quick trigger pull, that gives you the width of your fan. If you have got a 12-inch fan pattern, or you're supposed to, and it's less than 70% of that, so it's less than 9 inches wide, or it's, 8 inches wide, let's say, that tip is kind of towards the end of its life. But ways that guys get away from that is they hold the tip up higher off the deck, so they still get a wider fan. So they really don't realize that they're still over applying.
Yep.
We've had guys use tips that have been so, what we call blown out. It means that they're so far past their life cycle that they literally don't create enough back pressure. The pump can't keep up. It won't actually create a fan pattern anymore. And when you look down it looks like you could roll a bowling ball through it. They're so big. So, I mean, you really got to be cognizant of the fact that it is a wearable item. The number of gallons, it's the number one question I get asked. How long does a tip last? There really is no good answer to that because it's really dependent on the material. The best practices is to just do that test every morning and make sure that you've got, if you're using a spray tip that's supposed to make a 10 to a 12 inch fan pattern, it's at least making an 8 inch fan pattern. If it's not, you need to change it out.
Okay. So wrapping things up here, what cool things for the coating industry do you see coming up in the future?
I see a lot more robotics being introduced. I see a lot more equipment being used to take place of the labor shortage. A lot more automation. I think that a lot of that's, more of that is coming. I see a lot more integration coming as well, making logistics easier for contractors to move equipment around the job sites. From a coating standpoint, we're starting to see a lot more fast set products that are, going to take away the bad weather problem out of the equation.
I seen one at the International Roofing Expo 2 years ago by GAF.
Yep.
Literally set up in less than 60 seconds.
Yeah. So we're going to start seeing a lot more of that, I think. So there's a lot of technology that's coming down the line. I think what you're going to see though is you're not going to see a lot of like stuff at least from an equipment standpoint, in my opinion, like left field type of like products. I think you're going to see a lot of things that are being created using the current technology, but just improving on it and making it more user friendly and making it easier to work on and easier to work with. Because the idea is that we want to try to minimize downtime and we want to try to do as much as we possibly can with the good employees that we have, because it's the number one thing that's plaguing every construction trade right now.
Where do you think the roof coating industry is headed in the next 5 to 10 years?
I anticipate large growth. I do. Going back to the shortage on employees, I think that guys are going to try to do more with what they have. And I think that there are technologies out there that are going to allow them to do more with less. And I think that you're going to see guys wanting to move towards more of a monolithic standpoint. I know that is a big push, having a monolithic coating. You don't have any seams anymore. There's, no more places for it to leak, or minimizing the places that it can leak, right? So yeah, I see growth. I really do. I think that it's a growing industry, and there's a lot of interesting and exciting things that are happening within it. And we're excited to be part of it, certainly.
Okay. Well, I'm getting an opportunity to give a plug for your company a little bit because, I've seen you at a training before, and I've seen you, present and do kind of walk through everything we just talked through just a minute ago. But I didn't realize how much stuff you guys had your hands in until I looked at your website. In fact, I think it was overwhelming how many. I couldn't, I was trying to find a hose on there, and it was like, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff. I didn't realize how many things you guys have from, equipping. We're equipping a new coating trailer right now, and it was like, where do I start? You guys have hose reels and adapters and swivels and all kinds of stuff.
Right.
And it's really a deep rabbit hole if you want to go down it in equipment. So I want to give you a plug to just talk about how can people find you if they want to know more about how to get into coating. Maybe they want to do a consulting call with you to find out how to get set up with the rig. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, best way to get a hold of me is by my cell phone. I'm available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I know this industry, and I know that, when you guys need something, you need it now. And we're in an age where you want to be present always and try to be in front of people. So I always like to say, I'm available. Now, if you call me at 3:00 in the morning, I might be sleeping, but certainly the minute I wake up and I see a missed call, I will certainly give you a holler back. So, but the easiest way to get a hold of me is going to be via cell phone. You can reach me at 952-454-1889. Otherwise, you can always email me as well, which is J as in Joseph, Buechler, B as in boy, UECHLER @cjspray.com. Or if you'd like, you can also call into our 1-800 number. And we're going to have to go back and do this again, Andy, because I don't
put all this information right in the link on the actual post. So it'll be embedded right there. People can find it.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, otherwise you can call me or you can call our 1-800 number at 1-888-257-7729.
Okay. Cool. Well, I really appreciate being on the show today. I just enjoy talking about coatings a lot. That's really my favorite application. And I know that's not what this whole entire show is about, but I love talking about fluid applied coatings and where it's going in the future. And you sound like the guy that's gonna, really talk about equipment. Love talking about equipment, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, I appreciate you having me on here. And if there's anything that I can do for you and do for any of the people watching this, please reach out to me. Like I said, I pride myself certainly being more of an equipment consultant than a salesman.
Yeah, I think that you try to sell me anything, so it's really cool to just ask you questions and get a good unobjective answer. So
right. I mean, I'm a firm believer in creating relationships, right? And I think that once you create relationships and you create trust, then you can start doing business with somebody. So yeah, don't feel like you're going to call me and I'm going to start soliciting you for something. That's never the case. It's always trying to talk and understand your business and get you in the right direction. And from there, when you're ready to make that decision, we get you into a piece of equipment that makes sense for you and that is as easy to operate and as simple to operate and gives you as few headaches as possible, so you can concentrate on doing what you enjoy, and that's selling roofs and making money and making people happy. So
okay, well, thanks. You have a good night, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andy. You have a good one.
You too.
Take care.
You've been listening to the Rocket Roof Show podcast. Be sure to subscribe through your favorite podcasting platforms such as iTunes or Google Play to get the latest episodes as they are launched. For more, please follow us on social media or visit our website at rocketroofshow.com. We look forward to joining you here again soon at the next launch.